education committees in the House that means that in that way there's more public disclosure, and more thought, and an opportunity for comment on that before we get into those grants.
Senator Moore.
This is the one you worked out with the department because we decided you don't get too many grants over 20 million, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So this would be like a large grant. It's a race to the top.
Race to the top.
But we get input before we go ahead and implement something. Probably
Yeah,
not later.
That's right.
By the executive branch or wherever.
That's right.
Okay. That's good.
Actually, I don't believe we've ever had grant over $20 million. That's correct.
Race to the top.
I'm talking about cents race to the top. That is the only grant we've ever had that was over $20 million. So one more.
We actually had a $25 million competitive grant award for the Striving Readers program. I've done the earlier analysis. Those are the only two.
But we have not had 1 cent raise at the time. Any other questions from the Senate? I don't think we have anyone who has signed up to speak to that. I'll entertain
No, I was going to ask you if the readers
the department. I will ask the department to come in on this. I think the department is concerned with the, but go ahead and speak to that.
We are work with
Lou Ersky with DOE.
Thank you. We're satisfied with the changes that were made. It's right over, and it doesn't slow us down as far as being able to apply for anything like this. Again, I'm assuming we're knowing it, we're subject to the Senate and House Education Committee members.
Any other comments? I'll entertain the motion. Wait a minute. What number did you say, Secretary Stone? Okay, I misunderstood. I'm sorry. Do we have a second? Second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, please. All opposed, say. All opposed. Motion carries. All right, Senator, we'll next up Senate Bill 355.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with me on the bill and helping me out with it, and also the partners for doing that as well. We're dealing with really the effect of some of the assessments, and the bill does several things through the bill. Looking first in section 2, in lines 17 through 21, so paragraph R, it gives the local school systems and the state board the option of administering these standardized tests in paper form. There may be some students that, well, there are having students that really don't do well with the computerized format, and particularly some disabilities, and so that would be a deal for the school system, that option. And also, then moving on to subparagraph S, the federal law and the state law does allow for some opt-outs, and what we've seen in some instances throughout the state is that children whose parents have opted them out of the standardized test for whatever reason have not. And this doesn't occur everywhere. In some instances, you can't use the word punished, but there may be a class party afterwards. They're told, well, you can't attend this party if you don't take this. So they're told, well, you have to go in and you sit in this room and you stare at the wall while the testing is going on. And that's not wrong. And this just says that the school system should develop appropriate policies to take care of those children, to give them a positive learning experience while the testing is being administered. So there's not a sit and stare policy. Moving on to section 3, in line under subparagraph A, this addresses children who may have serious health conditions or life-threatening conditions or medical conditions which those are related to cognitive disabilities which impact their ability to take a standardized test. And this just gives them the opportunity to opt out so that they don't have to go through that stress and the challenge of having to take the assessment. Section B provides that the student misses the assessment, then they could take a second, be given another opportunity to take the test on the next time that the test is given, or to take an alternative assessment as approved by the state board, if appropriate. And if for some reason they miss the test and have to make a test, and that in some way affected their promotion, it establishes an appeals process so that they would have some due process rights to consider whether or not that should be grounds for not allowing them to advance. And then on page 3 in subparagraph C, if for some reason because of disabilities or otherwise the number of students excused did not meet the 95% requirement, then the school would be allowed to post a notice of that, just stating that the rating was affected by federal law and giving a brief explanation of what the law required, and then what the rating would have been for the school would have been, if not but for the federal law requirement. And then the teachers, principals, and assistant principals of the school system should not be penalized for any child who does not participate in the assessment. And then finally, we're in section 4. This is relating to the criteria and specific requirements for students in grades 3, 5, and 8. For students who do not perform on grade level in section B, for the retesting, we're allowing that child to be given an alternative assessment. And this would give our schools some flexibility, and it could be important because, as I understand it, the assessments are grade specific, and you can have a child who's performing below grade level who may make tremendous progress, but he may move from a second grade level to a third grade, but he's being tested at the fourth grade. He's still not going to perform well. Or you can have a child who's very gifted, who would have to go back and study, maybe on say 8th grade level, but he's given a 7th grade test. He would have to go back and study the 7th grade material in order to do well. So it just gives some more flexibility to an alternative assessment, and that's that.
Does your committee have questions?
On the CRCT right now, I believe the department policy is they give exceptions to, you just don't have to pass the test. Am I correct on that, Luke? Am I correct on that? The CRCT, do we have exceptions now? If a child doesn't pass the CRCT, are there not exceptions?
We don't take the CRCT anymore.
We don't do it. We're not using it, are we?
No.
That's when he said that. That's what I was trying to figure out. Isn't that gone? Yeah, that's what I mean. So I thought you said CRCT. That's what I was trying to figure out. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. All right, Georgia milestones, same thing. Do we not have exceptions right now? But we don't.
We have alternative assessments. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. That I'm trying to figure out what we're doing different in section 4 versus what he's asking.
We're not doing anything different than most times.
Okay, so it's currently what we're doing in Georgia milestones. Okay.
There are alternative that on an individual basis, if I understand your question correctly, we can look at the assessments and make adjustments based on individual students.
Only for children taking GAA.
I thought you were asking about grade retention. What was the question?
My question was on the end of grade assessment, okay? Okay, right now, when they're doing that, there's two questions, okay? On the milestones, are we using alternatives besides just the milestones?
There's an alternative assessment to the milestone.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. I just want to make sure. So there's nothing different here. Is there anything different here?
No.
That's what I was trying to see. I couldn't. You're just putting it along. Okay, I was trying to see if there's something different. I didn't think there was. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Stone? Yes, did I miss, did you state whether the department supports this or not?
Yes, I've worked with the department and we've integrated their suggestions into the substitute bill. And they support that.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a member of the DOE if you would come up and address the bill. Dr. Gary can give me with DOE.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to go through the bill. Senator Moore started that process. If you look at line 17 through 21, we allow students to take pencil and paper assessments. We're not at 100% online, and I'm not sure we'll ever be at 100% online for various reasons, but so we do allow that to take place online.
We already have guidelines that accompany the assessment requirements, and the guidelines already include much of what's listed here. There is a reference here to sit and stare policy. Now, you won't see that terminology in guidelines, but what we like the senator's alluding to is that students shouldn't be punished if they don't participate in assessments if the parents have said the child will not participate in assessments. And we don't hear too many complaints about that, but we also offer some suggestions to school systems on what they can do if a parent chooses for a child to opt out. So that will be covered in guidelines as well. Lines 40 through 49. We have no problems with that. There are circumstances in life where a student is not able to take the assessments. And this recognizes that and just asks for some verification. And no issues with that. Lines 50 through 61, that's very important because we don't want to take the position that a student who's been held out of assessment by the parent's request then would be retained in the class simply because they did not take the exam. Now, there may be other reasons that a student would be recommended for retention, not just based on the assessment. I want you to understand that as well. But this addresses retention based just on the assessment. We already have in the state board rules a parent appeal process for any time a student is recommended for retention, so this would not conflict with the current state board rule on promotion and retention. On line 62 through 70, this requires a little bit of an explanation. And to me, the key word is on line 62C, the first word being if. If a school, the federal government requires 95% student participation rate in assessment. This section indicates to us that if that drops below 95%, a CCRPI rating for the school still has to be calculated. We already have in place to do that anyway, in case the school does drop below the 95% participation rate, because we feel like parents need to know what the CCRPI rating would be despite the participation rate of students. So we already have the mechanism in place to do the metrics for that calculation. And then on line 83 through 86, this would not happen very often, but as the senator alluded to, we would allow for the local school system to look at situations like this on an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Senator Tate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last thing that's made about lines 85 through 87, is that already been done? You didn't allude to the fact that that was or was not already policy.
It's not already policy per se, but it's in the guidelines for assessment, where if the school system has a question about this issue, they should contact the Department of Education.
So that basically what you said about this bill is that this is already in policy.
Much of it.
Much of it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we've got 24 people signed up to speak on this bill. We can have a birthday here if y'all want to. But 23 are in favor of the bill. One is not stated one way or the other. I want to call the first one that signed up for the bill and say if anyone would like to speak against the bill, come up. I want to we'll go through some speakers. I don't know we're going to get all 24 because we've got the bills that have to deal with it. But I want to call on David Crook. C-A-S-S. Second one is Susan Brown.
I'm Bridget Bush.
Okay. I'm sorry, didn't see that. Go ahead, Ms.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Bridget Bush. I'm a wife, mother, grandmother, child care provider, and a substitute teacher in Forsyth County. I have a daughter, a nephew, a niece, and 2 grandchildren in the Georgia public school system. I'm also a CASA. That stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. I'm a sworn officer in the juvenile court system, which makes me a mandatory reporter of child abuse. I work alongside counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, guardian ad litem attorneys, defects caseworkers, and judges to whom I must report to. When I report to the judge in a child advocacy case, he or she must then act and respond in a way that rescues these little ones. He or she makes decisions and passes judgments that are not swayed by any political loyalties or personal relationships. Today, I'm reporting to you, and I ask you to exercise your power in the same way, with no political agenda. I mostly represent the children in the courts who have been removed from their homes due to abuse and neglect, being juggled between foster homes and very often are in the real-life nightmare of drug-addicted parents who are in and out of drug rehab. Their lives are roller coasters of hurt and disappointments that you and I cannot even fathom. That's who I'm here to speak up for today, the ones with no voice. Kids whose parents, their teachers will never see and who don't care what their flesh and blood is experiencing in their school daily. The school that is supposed to be a safe place for them. When I volunteered to speak for these kids who have no voice, I never dreamed I'd be speaking to legislators to plead for their protection from what's happening to them in their schools. These children should not be measured by an unvalidated test that adds months of further anxiety to their already wrecked lives. They should not be given the added burden of threats to not promote them to the next grade based on one test score. Their counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists absolutely agree. Their cognitive abilities are very likely temporarily disabled due to the duress they're under, and hours and days of stressful testing will not provide, even remotely adequate shelter where they are academically. So many of these children that I advocate for are on survival autopilot. They worry where they'll lay their head at night, whether they'll go hungry. Forget homework or nightly studying. To hold them to these days and weeks of high-stakes testing, which gives such little results, is further abuse to them, with no benefit to anyone, least of all the whole child, the reason that we're all here.
Ms. Crooks, we're going to give 2 minutes, I think, right there, if you would wrap it up.
Yes, sir, I sure will. We must have a provision for physicians or guardians to refuse or opt out for children such as these. You have the power to make what is right happen. We're asking that you use your power to protect these kids. They need you. This affects us all. If we don't protect children, we all fail. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you so much. Second speaker, we're going to have. Nobody in the audience is opposed to the bill, is that correct? I've seen no point in continuing the testimony, so
We're the child psychologist.
Pardon?
Child psychologist, if you'd like to.
Well, I think the bill's going to pass. It looks to me like we've got support passed.
Would you grab?
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed?
You understand that now, because you said a rule.
6553. That's the bill that we had on our agenda, and that's the bill that we were given. This is 6553.
This is the one that cuts off.
No, I'm talking about the one we just passed.
I'm sorry. Yes,
This is the one we just passed. Right. But we are working off of a different bill. I think in our agenda, we are working on 6561 because we had a substitution. And I think we have the right bill. We have 6561, but on the advertisement it's listed on the notice it's 6511. But we are working off of LC 33 65 64.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually heard this bill earlier in the week, and the substitute removes the provisions that we found objectionable, dealing with the ability to opt out and offering alternative courses. And other than that, the remains essentially the same. So I need to go through the bill. The other day, in the interest of time.
Okay.
I know there were other people that may want to speak.
Do we have any questions from the committee?
I'm going to be making constantly for them and doing a lot of that. We got to.
Okay, I would like to ask the representative from the DOE, I think Central Lebanon has worked with DOE extensively on this bill. I would like to ask the representative from the DOE if you would address it.
Thank you, Lou Urstein, Department of Education, and today we have with us Lizette Williams, our Chief Privacy Officer, Mr. Swayden, our Chief Technology Officer, who spoke Monday. He's unable to be here today, he's out of town on a mission, so he's having to join us. I wanted to say that while the bill addresses some of the things that we asked for, all of the concerns that the Chief Technology Officer requested be addressed were not addressed. There's still several things in here that we asked to have deleted that were not deleted, that are still in there. I find unacceptable. So lines 31 to 56, we had asked to have deleted, and then we had asked to have added some additional protections so that in the case of implementing a digital learning platform, that without a contract, that a teacher would receive training on how to properly use the platform to ensure the security and privacy of the student, and that the teacher should understand how the platform works, its principal purposes, how to use the platform without divulging any personal identifiable information, how to instruct the students on using the platform without divulging any personal information of their own. Essentially draconian restrictions placed in the bill in line, or remaining in the bill in line 31 to 56 are not acceptable to us. So we can't support the bill in its present form, even though it's been improved in response to some of the concerns that we've raised since Monday.
Ms. Miller, would you like to come in?
As he said, Mr. Sweden couldn't be with us today, so he asked me to come as Chief Privacy Officer. And as everyone knows, the law that was passed last year on student data privacy covers quite a bit of what an operator or a vendor can do with the data that is input into one of their systems without parent or student consent.
Okay. I've got, I think, two speakers lined up for the bill. I'd like to give each one of them 2 minutes apiece. Ms. Roberts and Ms. Dees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jen Robbins. I'm with the American Principles Project. The bill that you have now, the substitute bill, takes away the 2 provisions that created problems the other day, which was destruction of data so that the data is not kept forever, and the opt-out provision. So now I think we're down to a situation where I don't quite know what the concern is about this. The only thing that it would say now is that if you're going to use a digital platform, you get the vendor to tell you how it works and what sorts of data it collects on children, and you post it. That's all you have to do. It's strictly a transparency bill. It's not a data security bill. The bill that was passed last year and that goes into effect this summer does not put the restrictions on the vendors. That this bill just requires that they tell us what they're doing. And there are 3 reports that I wish people could read before you vote on this, which is one is Promoting Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance, came out of the U.S. Department of Education 3 years ago. Talks about how these platforms work. Another is called Expanding Evidence, Approaches for Learning in a Digital World, came out of the U.S. Department of Education 3 years ago. Talks about the enormously sensitive psychological data that these platforms collect. and another one is Cogs in the Machine, which came out of the Pioneer Institute, and I helped write it about some of these platforms. So the concerns are real, and the only thing this bill does, it's not a data security bill, it's not a question of data security, it's a question of whether this type of enormously sensitive data should be collected by the government or by private companies without parents' knowledge. That's all it does. But I would hope that you would vote for it.
Ms. Dee?
I'll be brief. My name is Tanya Diddy. I'm the State Director for Concerned Women for America. One of our issues is education, and in particular parental rights. I'm here just to support the bill, and saying the same thing as Ms. Robbins. And when I sat and listened to testimony the other day, I was perplexed on the testimony and the concerns of the bill, because it is just a transparency bill. We're not asking anyone not to do anything. We're just saying we support the bill because it allows parents to know what's being collected and what's happening at the school level. I have a background in instructional technology, and the yesteryears of Study Island and Skills Tutor is much different than the digital platforms of today. And I think parents are aware of what's going on with the new digital platform. So I'm here just to support the bill, again, saying it's just a transparency bill. We're not asking anyone not to do anything, just alert the parents of what's going on. Thank you.
We're going to take a 1 minute break.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend Senator Williams for working with the committee and continuing to work with the committee and providing a vehicle, opening up more information for parents, parental portal, parents or partners in the education of their children, and this recognizes that. Thank you very much.
It concerns me that the substitute that we received, I think that's exactly what it's going to be. And I think we do have some issues that I would personally like to see be resolved forward within your course of the bill. But I do think we need to get it right when we get it right. And I'd like to suggest that we hold this bill, and I think you're ready to work on that if you would like to address that. Can't we get a workable solution that folks that are having good information everybody happy? Thank you, sir. I appreciate your help. Yes, sir. We're going to hear Senate Bill 124 today. We will not take action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to talk about Senate Bill 124. Appreciate the chair providing me this opportunity for the first official conversation regarding Senate Bill 124 and the community schools concept. As Senate Bill 124 exists today, it is a pilot program. It calls for the establishment of a pilot program for funding from DOE. My approach, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, is to begin the conversation about community schools, and then at another time, next session, to move forward implementation of a pilot program on community schools. It has become, and I'm going to try to limit my conversation, Mr. Chair, so that I know there are at least a couple of MPs here that want to opine on this issue. But it has become very common in the last 20 years to say that all children can learn. As we say that, it is, I think, also important to understand that children, some children, particularly children in poverty, have severe impediments to learning. There are children here in Georgia, rural and urban, who may get a free breakfast and free lunch, but may not be able to have access to another meal until that next morning. And we won't even talk about over the summer and over the weekend. There are children who spend their school days in emergency rooms. It's my understanding that the number one reason that children go to the emergency room in Metro Atlanta is asthma. And so all children can learn, but we must recognize and solve the issue, present solutions to make sure that all children have the best opportunity to learn. And I believe that community schools is a part of that. At the center of the community schools concept, Mr. Chair, if you turn to page 2, lines 26 through 30, at the core of what we're talking about is establishing community partnerships. And so at the center of this is that definition right there about community partners means a community stakeholder including but not limited to parents organizations, student organizations, early learning programs, business, civic engagement organizations, advocacy groups, local civic and community-based organizations, civil rights organizations, local government agencies, local school employee organizations, and institutions of higher learning. If you turn to page 3, you'll see on top of the page 58 through 65, you will see that this pilot program would be made available in 4 different ways. One, to Title I schools, secondary schools that are eligible for but does not receive Title I funds, that is among the lowest achieving 15% of secondary schools in the state. 3, a high school that has had a graduation rate that is less than 60% over 3 years, and then finally any school the Department of Education determines as a school in poverty that would benefit from community school program. So at the core of what we're talking about is establishment of community partners to work with schools that are with at-risk children. On page 4, under A, on line 96, we have a central element of the community schools concept, and that is having a positive discipline practice in that school. This is something that is common to almost all community schools. Having a service offered to students, whether it be a student discipline process, mediation, to make sure that, particularly to make sure that schools and students have a process by which discipline is focused upon. One of the great things about community schools, and community schools have been implemented in Cincinnati. I think the state of New York, the entire state of New York, the state of Kentucky has a school, community school process. But in all those community schools where mediation and other kind of disciplinary processes are implemented, we see fewer suspensions, fewer expulsions, less disruptive activity on the part of students. So that is a central element, and you'll see on page 96, each applicant would have to demonstrate how it will transition to a positive discipline practice. And then a applicant in this pilot program would have to, beyond that discipline program, would have to provide a minimum of 2 of the following types. And you see a whole host of services. One of the central elements, in addition to community partnerships, in addition to new discipline practices, is the idea of wraparound services, which schools would provide. You know, if a child needs a third meal, that would be a program that would be offered. If it's determined that that pilot program would include a full-time nurse in that school, that would be part of it. But you see a whole host on page 4, a whole host of services, wraparound services, early childhood services, academic enrichment, summer or after-school programs. Parental involvement would be an emphasis, as well as mental and physical health and community involvement. So in on page 6, you will see a discussion that there would be an evaluation at the top of the page of the need for and availability of those wraparound services that I talked about. That application would also on line 176 include a determination of community assets that would be available in the community school, as well as a baseline analysis of community assets in the neighborhood surrounding the school. It would also require on page 7 a school leadership team, an internal school leadership team for the implementation of the policies. And then the final thing that I want to talk about on page 8 would also include a resource coordinator to coordinate services at each covered school site on page 8, line 240. That's what the application would involve, just very, very broadly, Mr. Chair. The time has come for additional models, as I always hear around under the Gold Dome, additional tools in the toolkit. This is one more tool in the toolkit, in addition to some of the other approaches that have been common over these last 12 to 14 years that I've been down here at the state capitol. I've been on the education committee for 18 out of my 20 years, 9 out of my 10 terms. I've seen a lot of school reforms and innovation, things that have been touted as innovations come through this committee. This is just another innovation. I will speak to the issue of cost, because I know that's a concern of many people. I will say first and foremost, this is a pilot program. Applicants would be entirely voluntary. They could or could not participate in the pilot program. 2, the partnerships that the community school is a central element, would include partnerships with businesses, other nonprofit organizations, and the resources necessary, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure, because I know the cost issue is an issue, the budget issue is an issue. So in addition to this being a local decision, those localities who want to establish a community school will be partnering, not only with nonprofit, but with business organizations, just like some charter schools are doing. Drew Charter in Atlanta partners with the business community and raises the resources to provide the services. They have as a matter of fact, they have a nurse on site 24 for the entire school day. They do, in some instances, some of the charters do provide a third meal. So partnerships are very important in getting the resources to make sure that those child have the services that they need. And then each and every school is going to have to decide. A budget is a document which reflects priorities, and each school system who thinks a community schools approach is appropriate is going to have to determine whether their budget money is sufficient, to offer these wraparound services in a community school concept. I mean, at some point in time, assuming as it has been done in other places, that the student performance does improve, whether it be Cincinnati or Kentucky or New York, we're going to, each school system is going to determine not only can we afford this, can we afford not to do this. Because poverty and the impediments to learning are just that great. And then finally, the new Every Student Succeeds Act provides grant money, federal grant money, to implement community schools in different localities. So providing the resources, providing the budget money to implement this is always an issue. Who's going to pay for it? I think the resources are out there in this, but this pilot program would be a voluntary program. The only other thing I would want to say, Mr. Chair, before we hear from, in short form, from anybody who you would like to hear from, I would say that, I would repeat that this conversation is an important conversation. I appreciate you, Mr. Chair, providing us this opportunity to begin this conversation, but it's only the beginning. I think it's a good idea to give school systems another way to approach this issue. We are going through a controversy right now, even as we speak, with the Opportunity School District. And whatever position you stand on that issue, I don't think we can disagree that an additional approach has to be looked at long and hard, and that's why next session I plan on continue to work on this issue if the voters deem it that I should be back amongst you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's as much as I want to say. I'd be glad to take any questions from any of you, my colleagues on the committee. And I know there are people, how many people are here interested in this issue? Raise your right hand. Okay, we have, yes. Okay, so we have folks here who have come expressly for this, Mr. Chair. We appreciate your cooperation.
Thank you, sir. Senator Sanders.
Just a question, Senator Ford. Could you use the charter approach to charter a community school?
I would think so. I don't know any reason why you would not be able to, just as long. I'll go further. Could a charter school apply for this pilot program? I don't see any language in this bill that would.
Is there anything that would prevent a group wanting to form a charter school from taking this approach to the formation?
I don't think so. I don't think so. As a matter of fact, as I said, the Drew Charter School that I just mentioned has elements. There are different schools that have different elements. For example, Whiteford Elementary School, a few blocks from here in Atlanta, which is a regular public school, uses, is probably out front of most schools in the country with healthcare, a doctor and or a nurse practitioner on site.
Ford, I do commend you on this and ask that any information that you have in terms of what you would consider to be the most successful models in the United States, maybe you can give that to my office and distribute it as well as any financial information you might have. I mean, certainly those up and running or they had generated cost of database for what the financial impact may be. I would be curious to see that in terms of both a student cost that they generate per site and also what the total building cost would be to see what size schools they're putting in place, the size makes a difference, the smaller is better or larger is better. Any information you could give us back then, I look forward to continue this conversation. information. We do have 7 speakers signed up to speak. And I ask you to talk for 2 minutes to read and hear what you've got to say. But call on Ramona Toombs, Andy Faraka, and Mindy Harper.
Good afternoon. I'm Ramona Toombs. Thank you, Chairman and Committee. Community schools are meant to serve the unique needs of the individual communities. They do make a difference in the lives of the children and families and educators in their communities. If we move beyond the normal confines of the school itself and take time to partner with local stakeholders, community schools provide real solutions to unique problems of the students and their families. Community schools aren't just centers of education. They are the heart of the community. They create better conditions for both teaching and learning. They are the bolts that bind the teachers, the families, the community members, and the service providers into a purposeful, coordinated, results-focused machine. Across the country, community schools have been shown to reduce health-related obstacles that cost students precious instructional time. As a result, they miss fewer days of school for treatable illnesses and are less distracted by medical issues within the classroom. Community schools also decrease student mobility rates. By serving as the hub of the community, it allows families to establish roots rather than move from place to place in search of necessary resources. Community schools promote stable, healthy neighborhoods. Community schools also help parents support the work that is done by teachers in the classroom. When parents and families utilize the services at the community schools along with their children, they are more likely to gain skills such as English language assessments.
About 15 seconds.
Okay. With barriers removed and the playing field level, students are better focused, parents are more engaged, and teachers are empowered to concentrate on what's most important, teaching the children. This is not another program. It is a paradigm shift in the way we think about schools that goes well beyond providing for the support and services of the community.
Good afternoon, esteemed legislators and guests. I'm Andy Faraka. Just 7 points. Community schools provide more than one type of services to students: academic, medical, mental, adult education classes, and other things that the community decides that it needs in its area. The community schools, because it is a community school, better support and enable a strong academic curriculum. And again, the variances based on culture, languages, what do we need in our area? And partnerships are created which are purposeful because the people are concerned and they want the very best for their children, and so does the community. Community schools share a vision and a mission that are results driven. A site resource coordinator makes sure that all of these services and community providers are working together, focusing on the same set of results to ensure that students are getting the services most attuned to their social, emotional, and economic needs. Community schools work with students, but also engage families and communities. And lastly, effective community schools are governed by the local level, and decisions are made with consulting with the stakeholders, including the teachers. And it is tailored to the community needs. And as you know, people when they go house hunting like to say, oh, Walton District, Johns Creek. They want to know that where they're moving is a good school, and it provides them and their children with what they need for a good education. Thank you.
Ms. Harper.
Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Harper, and I'm a retired public school teacher. I'm also an officer with the Georgia Federation of Teachers. The GFT, along with our national affiliate, The American Federation of Teachers are advocates of community schools. The data has consistently shown that those students who attend community schools have improved performance as well as increased motivation to learn. Giving students in struggling schools the resources and support needed to be successful is what we call reclaiming the promise of public education. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the city chaplain, Venetia Elrod, and I think it's Cicely, can't make that name.
Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, I'm Dr. Sid Chapman. I'm the elected president of the Georgia Association of Educators. We represent thousands of educators in Georgia. And we're also a state affiliate of the 3 million member National Education Association, who firmly believes in community schools. I want to first thank Senator Ford for your ongoing commitment to public education and for our introduction of this bill. Also, I'd like to thank Chairman Tippins for and Ford for coming over on GAE Day at the Capitol. We had a large group, about 200 educators from GAE and about 50 from our good friends from GIT. We are delighted that there are so many bills this year that are moving in the right direction. That encourages us. One such bill is Senate Bill 124, which provides sustainable community school operational support that mirror many of the suggestions in our recent report, Community-Driven Strategies for Strong Public Schools in Georgia, that was written by the Southern Education Foundation and the Annenberg Institution for School Reform at Brown University. It can be found at gae.org. That report and this legislation both relate that the integrated inclusion of parents and community and stakeholders are key to the success of many of our own low-performing schools. We support measures in this bill that would create opportunities to first thoroughly analyze school needs and challenges, as well as address the critical issues such as parental involvement, the mental and physical health of students, academic support, and enrichment opportunities. As educators, we are committed to the success of our students and value our role in their achievement. Okay, thank you again for all your opportunity that you've given us to speak on this bill, all the good bills that are moving forward, all your good work, and we look forward to continuing to work. Thank you very much.
Hello, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak, and also thanks in the report for this bill forward. I am, again, Tanisha Elrod from Georgia PTA. I'm the legislative chair. I represent over 250,000 members. I speak in favor of the bill because it embodies what we, as leaders in PTA, try to instill in our members to actually go in their communities and actually perform some of the things that community schools provide. As you know, I hope you know, National PTA has 6 standards in effective family and school partnership that embodies those standards of community schools. The National PTA Family School Partnership standards are welcoming all families, communicating effectively, supporting student success, speaking up for every child, sharing power, and collaborating with the community. These standards help local school communities implement programs, practices, and policies that encourage partnerships between families, schools, and communities, and promote student success. We believe giving families and communities all a meaningful and accountable role in the education of the children will give all parties involved ownership, and they will be more inclined to work hard to make sure that the schools succeed. Also, they will be invested, and you know, when we invest in something, we want to see, we want to get our money's worth. There's a lot of proven truth. Okay, it takes a village, and in this case, it will take a community school. Thank you, and I ask for your favor for SB125.
Thank you. Seriously,
Hello, I'm Cecily Harshkanay, and I'm here on behalf of Public Education Matters Georgia and the Southern Education Foundation to speak in support of this bill. We have done a lot of traveling and visiting with schools and schools community throughout Georgia, and what you find so often in schools that are struggling is that it's not that they're not being given support by the school system or they're not being given support by the DOE, they are. But they often have very specific needs about a population that's struggling within their school, and this ability to go out and seek these grants would help them address these needs and in turn address educational issues. So schools, that are dealing with, high levels of poverty or other, specific needs that, prevent them from really fulfilling the school day and the school community that would best serve their kids. So I'm just going to give one example of a school that I've been in recently that came to mind when I read this bill. And I won't call it by name, but it was a middle school in DeKalb County. This school has 52 languages spoken by the students in the school. The principal is doing a beautiful job of bringing the students in and making them feel welcome, but you have all the issues that you have with the middle school in any way, of different feeder schools coming in and some, turf rights, those kind of things that you have struggles with it. And on top of that, these many languages, 52 languages, I can't even imagine that. And on top of that, what the parents' needs are. So when I read this bill, I thought, this school having the ability to go out and get a grant, to have some afternoon and evening classes that address the needs of the parents, address the needs of the students, and these language needs, and really bring together and make it a community hub, which, as I said, the school's doing a good job of that already, but to have that extra support. And then the other thing I was just going to say is it's already been mentioned, the Annenberg and the Southern Education Foundation report, Invest in What Works, Community-Driven Strategies for Strong Public Schools. But it offered 8 essential evidence-based strategies for success in strengthening public schools. These 8 strategies, we all know, they're common sense. I think this bill, when it goes through and talks about the different things that can be used for these grants, 5 of them are specifically addressed in this report, are overlapped in this bill. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the work y'all do.
I'd like to have more input from you.
Okay.
Deciding those information so we can move along.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Ms. Seaver.
I want to thank you, and particularly Senator Lack, who didn't have a special needs speaker, and but also for giving us a chance to start moving forward. And speaking today from a very personal position after for several years, 5 years or so, attending so many meetings in Atlanta public schools, and over again, same circumstances, where the services and the bringing together of people that this was possible really made a difference. I often react with what I think of as kind of a 4-year-old sense of justice. It's not nice not to share these things, especially resources when people are suffering so much without them. When I first started attending meetings at what was at the time Kennedy Middle School, there was a sign out there that was obsolete by that time. It said Kennedy Middle School and Community Center. And I've heard stories about what used to be able to go on there. I know there's other places in the state where that's been the case. It's almost trite now to call for wraparound services when speaking to a body like this or to the board, but very few have been doing something concrete about it. I hope that by doing this, because so much is needed in public schools, if something can happen at the state level, that will maybe lead the city and county governments, who have not always been good at working with the schools, to come forward and support each other's efforts. So whatever any of us can do to help this happen.
Thank you so much. Is there any other business to come before our committee? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.
Just
No, they're done for today. They're not going to take action on this bill today.
Thank you.